That's not a statistic. That's a city. Imagine the entire population of San Jose, California wiped off the map. Imagine every single person in Birmingham, England gone. Fathers, sons, brothers, conscripts who were handed a rifle and a train ticket and told they were going to win in 3 days. 1 million casualties. In late February 2026, a former senior Western official, someone with direct access to classified intelligence streams, quietly put that number on the table. 1 million Russian military casualties since the first tank rolled across the Ukrainian border on February 24, 2022. Not wounded, not missing. Casualties, a term that swallows the dead, the permanently disabled, and the battlefield wounded into one brutal, honest number. And the Kremlin? They have never not once come close to admitting it. Because this number doesn't just tell you how the war is going. This number tells you everything about what kind of country Russia has become, what kind of man Vladimir Putin is, and what happens when a superpower bleeds in secret while the cameras are rolling somewhere else. Stay with me, because the story behind this figure is darker, stranger, and more consequential than anything you've seen on the evening news. To understand what 1 million means, you have to go back to the beginning, to the arrogance that started all of this. In February 2022, Russian military planners believed Ukraine would collapse in 72 hours. They loaded their soldiers onto trucks with 3 days of rations. Some were reportedly told they were going on exercises. The plan was a blitzkrieg, a lightning decapitation of the Ukrainian government, a puppet regime installed in Kiev, the West too slow and too divided to respond. It failed. Spectacularly. The Russian military that invaded Ukraine was not the modernized force that Kremlin propaganda had spent decades building on paper. It was riddled with corruption. Equipment that existed on spreadsheets didn't exist in reality. It had been sold off, cannibalized, or simply never built. Logistics collapsed within days. Vehicles ran out of fuel. Units lost communication with each other. And Ukraine, armed with Western anti-tank missiles and burning with a ferocity that caught everyone off guard, held, then pushed back. The Battle of Kiev, the whole reason the war was supposed to be over in 3 days, ended with Russian forces retreating in humiliation by late March 2022. And from that moment forward, Russia had only one strategy left. Mass, throw more men, fire more shells, accept losses that would be politically suicidal in any democratic country, and keep going, because in Russia, the alternative admitting defeat is existential for the man at the top. So they threw wave after wave. The Donbas grinding offensive of 2022, the bloody battle for Bakhmut, which cost Russia staggering numbers for a city of no real strategic value. The failed winter offensives, the Wagner Group's short-lived mutiny, and the chaos that followed. Each chapter of this war consumed Russian lives at a rate that military analysts described as reminiscent of the First World War industrial era attrition warfare in the 21st century. By the end of 2023, independent estimates from Ukrainian military intelligence, Western defense ministries, and open-source analysts like Oryx were already tracking Russian losses in the hundreds of thousands. By mid-2024, the figure had crossed what many thought was unimaginable. By late February 2026, someone who knew someone with access to the actual intelligence said the word out loud: 1 million. Now here's where it gets complicated, and this is the part most outlets won't slow down to explain to you properly. 1 million casualties is not 1 million deaths. The term casualties in military doctrine is deliberately broad. It includes killed in action, those who died on the battlefield or shortly after. It includes wounded in action soldiers who were pulled off the front line with injuries serious enough to remove them from combat. It includes those captured, those missing in action, and in some accounting frameworks, those rendered permanently combat ineffective through psychological breakdown. So what does the breakdown actually look like? Based on cross-referenced estimates from multiple Western intelligence services and independent analysts, the approximate picture looks something like this. Somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 Russian soldiers are believed to have been killed outright. That is a conservative figure. Some analysts put it higher. Another 600,000 to 700,000 are estimated to have been wounded, with a significant proportion of those wounds being severe amputations, traumatic brain injuries, spinal damage. The rest account for prisoners of war and missing personnel. Now think about what that means for Russia as a country. Russia entered this war with an active military force of roughly 900,000 personnel. The losses it has absorbed since February 2022 represent a complete generational bloodletting. To sustain the war, Putin had to do something he swore he would never do. He announced a partial mobilization in September 2022, and the scenes that followed told you everything. Russian men flooded airports trying to leave the country. Traffic jams stretched for miles at every border crossing Finland, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia. Hundreds of thousands of Russians, educated, working-age men, chose to leave rather than fight. Those who couldn't leave or couldn't afford to showed up at mobilization centers. Many of them received days of training, sometimes hours, before being handed a weapon and sent east. The Kremlin has been recruiting from prisons, offering pardons to convicted murderers and rapists in exchange for 6 months of frontline service. They have been paying signing bonuses that dwarf average Russian salaries, targeting the poorest regions of the country: Siberia, the Caucasus, Buryatia, where economic desperation runs deep. Across Russia, in small towns and villages far from Moscow, women have been lighting candles in churches for sons who are never coming back. The Kremlin has suppressed the death notices. Families have been pressured into silence. Coffins have been buried quietly. But silence only holds for so long. 1 million is the number that breaks the silence. So what does 1 million casualties actually mean for the trajectory of this war and for what comes next? First, understand what it means militarily. Russia has not collapsed. That is the uncomfortable truth that Western optimists have had to repeatedly confront. Russia has proven capable of absorbing losses at a scale that would have triggered political revolution in any Western democracy, and continuing to fight. The question has never been whether Russia can sustain losses, it's whether it can sustain them faster than Ukraine can be supplied, faster than Western political will can erode, faster than the global South shifts its alignment. 1 million casualties slows Russia down. It degrades unit cohesion, combat experience, and officer quality. Every experienced sergeant and lieutenant killed in a pointless frontal assault takes years of institutional knowledge with him. The Russian military that fights today is increasingly a force of hastily trained conscripts, prison recruits, and North Korean soldiers operating alongside depleted professional units. Its ability to conduct complex combined arms operations, the kind of maneuver warfare that wins modern conflicts decisively, has been severely degraded. But here is the strategic paradox. A weakened Russia is not necessarily a rational Russia. As the casualties mount, as the economic pressure of Western sanctions compounds, as the isolation deepens, the calculus around what Vladimir Putin might consider an acceptable endgame becomes darker and less predictable. A leader with nothing to lose and a nuclear arsenal is the most dangerous kind. For Ukraine, 1 million Russian casualties represents something else entirely. It represents the validation of a strategy trade space for time, make every kilometer of advance cost Russia more than it can politically afford, and trust that attrition will eventually force a reckoning. Whether that reckoning comes at a negotiating table or in the streets of Moscow is something no intelligence service on Earth can tell you with certainty. For the world, this number is a warning. It is a warning to every government that assumed this war would be short. It is a warning to every military planner who underestimated the cost of conventional warfare in the modern era. It is a warning to every population that believes nuclear deterrence makes great power conflict impossible, because what is happening in Ukraine right now is great power conflict by proxy, and it is consuming human lives at a rate not seen since the Second World War. 1 million Russian casualties. Putin never wanted the world to know that number. He built an entire architecture of censorship, propaganda, and fear to keep it buried. But numbers have a way of escaping in funeral announcements, in the silence of missing men, in the testimony of soldiers who survived and the families of those who didn't. And now the number is out. The only question that matters is what the world is going to do with it.